Class on Inclusion Intelligence, I would like to invite Ms. Kanika Tewari, CEO, Go Diverse. Kanika is a leadership coach, consultant, researcher who has worked on projects in US, Europe, Japan, Korea, Africa, China, Philippines, Malaysia, Singapore, Sri Lanka, and Southeast Asia. She is visiting faculty at leading business school, MDI, IIFT, IMI, Ford School, and others. She is a personal coach for CXOs for creating the inclusionary leader through expertise in unconscious bias, gender intelligence, and culture effectiveness in global diversity. Kanika brings in with her rich experience of working with a multinational organization in sales marketing, HR specialist roles, and talent management over 19 years of experience. Kanika mentors young women globally with Sherry Blair Foundation. She is the co-founder of Destination Boardroom, an executive leadership program for women leaders. She is currently pursuing her PhD in inclusive leadership. She is an alumnus of Convent of Jesus and Mary. She is a Pune University rank holder, pharma graduate from MIT. Her Master of Art is in Women and Gender Studies from Delhi. I would like to call Ms. Kanika on board for the same.
Hello, namaskar. Good afternoon, Sat Shri Akal. My name is Kanika Tewari, and we are also the diversity inclusion partners at the conference. But who am I really? So my father was in the army. How many schools do you think I've changed over the years that I studied? Just a rough approximate. 8? Let's do best of 3. 10? Anybody can top that? My parents did top that. 13 is the right answer. And I tell my parents कि यार लोग आजकल अपने बच्चों के ट्यूशन नहीं बदलते हैं और आपने मेरे 13 स्कूल बदल दिए. So that's my life. My father's actually been posted in Aizawl. He's also been posted in a small place called Firozpur. It's on the border of Punjab and Pakistan. You've probably never heard of it. I studied there. I have been to Banihal. It's between Jammu and Srinagar. दोनों तरफ 6 घंटा आप कहीं नहीं जा सकते पढ़ने. And I've also studied in Kerala. So in my little experience as a Fauji kid, I've realized that the country is so diverse. And that's when about 10 years back, I started my company. I was thinking, kya naam rakhu? And I felt Go Diverse is the right name. And I could have kept the name Go Women or Go Girl, but I felt Go Diverse made more sense because in a country like India, it's so much about diversity because it's more about gender, caste, creed, religion, disability, sexuality. There is so much to it, and that's what I intend to cover here. So before I start today and I tell you what the session is, I'm going to talk to you about what the session is not. So what is this session not? Let's go forward. Can I get the slide changer, please? So what the session is not. This session is not, this is not a feminist sexist session. Okay? This is also not an anti-men, anti-women session. And this is also not a patriarchal, matriarchal session. सदियों से चला आ रहा है, उसका हम कुछ नहीं कर सकते. What we can do is we can talk about today and we can create something for tomorrow, and that's the agenda of the conversation. Does that work? All the men in the room have taken a big sigh. They're like inclusion की बात हो रही है और men bashing नहीं हो रही है. All right, let's go forward. Enough about me. I'd love to hear from you. I'm going to ask you to take out your phones for the right reasons, all right, which is scan the code and play along with us. Can I have the quiz on the screen, please? So please scan it. We're all set to show it to you. Participate along. We have a coveted prize that I'm going to give away in a short while. You can scan the code, or alternatively, you can go to www.menti.com. And that's the code on the top, please. Confused हो जाऊंगी मैं. All in? Are you in the right place? You're of course in the right place by being in the conference, but I mean on Menti, are you on the right page? Can we get the Menti page, please? So the code is 8. So tell me, where are you originally from? मतलब roots कहाँ की है? Nanihal, Dadihal, whatever you want to call it, कहाँ के हो आप? Let's go. We have a large audience. Let's see what we get on the screen here. We have 34 people. I'll give last 10 seconds. You can still scan the code, which is on the bottom of the screen there. Okay, let's look at the results. Let's see what we get. Okay, we also have some aliens in the room. Be careful, mindful. You know, now I can sense there is a lot of diversity on the screen. Now, does diversity lead to unity? Yes, no? Old adage, right? Diversity leads to a lot of unity, but does it lead to unity? Shaky heads, guessing heads. You know, my father was in the army, like I told you. तो वो मुझे हमेशा कहते थे कि जब इलाहाबाद में SSB होता है, and you have these candidates and cadets coming in, at that point of time, the first 1 week used to be mayhem. Because so many people, so many men and boys coming from different parts of the country, different experiences, different conditioning, the first few months are actually chaotic. And research proves that homogeneous teams sometimes do so much better than heterogeneous teams, because heterogeneous teams sometimes get just caught in the chaos. They never move towards collaboration. So diversity may not lead to unity unless you've been able to tip the point from chaos actually to collaboration. Let's go forward. Let's go to the next one. It's a quiz, okay, folks in the room. Now this is like Kaun Banega Crorepati. I have taken the crore, right? But what you can do is you can respond the answer and fastest fingers first. All right, let's go. Let's see. What was the percentage of women coaches in Olympics 2024? Akkad bakkad Bombay bo nahi karna hai. But think it through. Can I invite you to respond on your phone, please? Okay, so the correct answer is 23% only. Actually, this is much better. 4 years back, this number was actually even less than 10%. Let's go to the next one. Is mental health care covered by insurance and organizations? What do you think? You know, and especially after COVID, the need for, you know, people coming out of mental concerns is so high. And let's see what the answer really is. So if it's not covered, there is very high chance that if someone's battling with anxiety, they're never going to even talk about it. If you make it so tabooed, how will people come out of it? Let's go forward. We have the second last question for you folks in the room. And the question is, how many weeks of paid maternity leave are women entitled to in the US? It's the most developed country in the world. Let's see what numbers do we get here. और आवाम की जनता, आवाम क्या कह रही है? We'll get to know very quickly. What is the Awam saying? The Awam is saying, oh, very high percentage of you are saying 26%, but actually the right answer is 0. 0 paid maternity leave. Paternity पे तो मैं अभी जा ही नहीं रही हूँ, right? So कई बार मुझे लगता है कि यार इंडिया में things are so much better. You know, you can keep comparing, but things are. Let's go next. Let's have the last question. This is the final deciding question. We'll get the winner from this. And the question for you is, what do you see in the following image? Some people are conserving energy. They haven't taken out their phones. Okay, let's see what you get here. बाजू वाले को भी नहीं पता है, उससे पूछ के कुछ नहीं होगा. Right? So you have to give your own answer here. Okay. How many of you saw a triangle? And was there a triangle? यार मैंने पढ़ा इतने स्कूल चेंज करने के बाद भी ट्रायंगल की तीनों साइड होनी चाहिए. And the beauty is we see what we want to see. और कई बार fill in the blank तो हम खुद ही कर देते हैं. इस स्कूल से है तो ऐसा होगा, इस शहर का है तो ऐसा होगा, vernacular accent है तो यहाँ पे जेल नहीं कर पाएगा. Right? These are our own styles. Let's look at who the winner is. And the winner is somebody called Please reach out to me after the quiz. I have a prize for you. And the winner is metal. Who's metal? Clearly demonstrating metal in the room. Who's that? Okay, sir. Please reach out to me. Let's go forward. Let's have the question. Let's go on the next one. In your organizations or around you, what are you hearing about diversity, inclusion, women? क्या सुनाई दे रहा है आपको? What are people's reaction to efforts for inclusion? We don't have time. Orders from the top. It's a good thing to do. We have business reasons. Or are we really authentically inclusive? हो क्या रहा है? Let's hear. आवाम की आवाज़ को पहचानते हैं. Let's see what you have to say. Okay, let's look at the results. क्या ये सत्य है? You know, I also like to call myself physically fit, but I'm not sure I am. And I'm similarly thinking for all of us feeling, oh, I'm very authentically inclusive. Reality sometimes could be very different. And this is looking more like my son's report, you know, son's commitment to studies. He feels it's a good thing to do. Mama, I know studies are important. He's a teenage now. But if this is where we are, and we are all L&D folks in the room, if this is where we feel we are, reality could be 2 steps actually behind. Let's go forward. Let's have the last question up. What's your personal DEI journey so far? When I say DEI, I'm talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Where is your journey so far? आप क्या कहते हुए पाए गए हो अपनी organizations में या क्या सुनते हुए पाए गए हो आजकल? There's no right answer and there is no wrong answer. It's your answer. Okay, let's look at the results. ये बहुत बढ़िया है. Expect HR to get it done. HR themselves are saying that. Hey Ram. And I'm also hearing someone saying mandate from the top. It's like my son saying, "Mummy ne bol ke gayi hai, padhai karna hai, Pune gayi hai, sham ko aake marungi nahi to." Yeah, this is sounding more like that. And I wonder if our inclusion efforts are ranging from expect HR to get it done and mandate from the top. How sustainable are we going to get forward? Can we switch back to the slides, please? Okay, so we've just looked at where your organization is on the gender intelligence continuum. So let me explain to you where could you possibly be. You see, you could be between not a priority, artificial harmony. कह हम कुछ कर रहे हैं, कर हम कुछ और रहे हैं. We could be warming up to values. Business imperative hai and authentically inclusive. Let me tell you where organizations can typically be here. Now, organizations could vary from 20% are on don't care, not interested. When I go to them for a conversation, they're like, "Madam, kal aana." या परसों ही आना actually वो better रहेगा because हमारे पास time नहीं है ये diversity और inclusion conversation करने की. And I swear to God, I respect these organizations because at least they've got their priority very right and I like such conversations. Now, the next is the 60%, which is in the middle, well-meaning, but sometimes misaligned. Now, होता क्या है यहाँ पे? HR ने एक red carpet लगाया, बहुत सी ladies को hire किया, you know, percentage बढ़ाया, and you put a red carpet. Now, it's like bringing, HR has brought a beautiful bride home. अभी आपका घर ही order में नहीं है. The bride is not going to stay, and then you'll say bride में problem थी. है ना यार, जेठ में problem थी. अब जेठ में तो कोई ढूंढता नहीं है, bride में ही निकाल देते हैं. What I'm trying to tell you is that you could put a great red carpet, but if the culture doesn't sustain, it's going to be a completely conflicting behavior, and that's why all efforts go into complete vain. And the last is authentically inclusive, and typically 20% of organizations are really here. I will let you choose in your entire organization, where do you typically think you possibly are? I'm going to take this forward because I want to talk about how organizations range from mandate to movement. And there are 3, yes. The previous one. So it says that you have started warming up to the value. You see it like, oh, it's not a bad thing to do. Everybody is doing it, so maybe we can also do it. Other consulting firm, other manufacturings are doing it. I recently was working with a client and they're like, yeah, Tata Motors ne Pune mein pura ek plant bana diya hai. Women only. Humko bhi banana hai. You know, so sometimes it's also warming up, but had they actually reached a business imperative, because Tata Motors ne plant banaya is not a good enough reason for you to work on it, is what I really mean by that. Okay, I'm going to take it forward, and this is the entire spectrum of mandate to movement and where organizations can possibly be. So let's talk about it. So the focus areas is, there is a focus, then we also have center of gravity, and lastly, the attributes. So number one is compliance. Do you know what is the percentage of mandatory compliance for PSUs to hire people with disability? Mandatory compliance, 4%. And who's driving this? Legal. They're like, hello, साल के end में report डालनी पड़ती है, Central Secretariat में बहुत problem हो रहा है, please get this done, and please work with some NGOs and get it done. So you see, that's what happens. The second that you see is programmatic, very HR, DEI led, and only if an organization is able to go past this is where actual real tipping point happens, because this is where it becomes leader-led or maybe more business-led. It's no more an HR agenda, it's a business agenda. And it's fine if you want to just remain here, but if you're moving towards inclusion, it's a step forward. You can take pictures of the slide. And the last one is integrated. This is the only time in organization when conversations stop from diversity and they start becoming about inclusion. And that's the spectrum or the needle move that has actually happened. I know a lot of you, and I have been speaking to some of you since morning, have a huge DEI agenda, especially with respect to gender. And it's fair enough also, right? Gender cuts through 50% of the population, so it kind of makes sense that this is an easier to do initiative for you. Let me tell you what works. Let me tell you what doesn't work. Okay, so on a likelihood of success and impact of success, what doesn't work really is diversity compliance workshops. Now I know this one is quite controversial, but ये मेरा मानना है, and I could be humbly wrong, which is this: that diversity in posh workshops जिसमें हम सिर्फ men को भेज देते हैं, it looks like नारी मुक्ति मोर्चा for men, and they're like हमें फिर भेज दिया यहाँ पे, हम सीख तो गए हैं. And I think this entire thing between morally men and everybody now knows what is the right thing to say. क्या कहना है ये सबको मोटा मोटा समझ आ गया इतने सालों की diversity और posh workshops के बाद. But is morality equal to reality? So when I go to an organization, they're like, हम posh workshop कराएंगे. I'm like, सिर्फ men को मत भेजना, please. Because then it looks like they are being bashed against it. You know, posh is not, which is gender, it's gender agnostic. Today you have more men, so you have more women complaining. If you keep all women in an organization, will men not complain? I'm not sure. So gender, posh and other cases are very gender agnostic. The second what doesn't work is targeted recruitment of women. और इसका मतलब ये है, how many of you have sibling in the room? और अगर आपकी मम्मी आपकी फ्रेंड को नहीं आने दे रही है और भाई का फ्रेंड अलाउड है, तो बुरा लगता था ना? Exactly वही है. Right? It looks like one sibling is getting more love, and this can lead to sibling rivalry. So please, only targeted recruitment, हम 10% से 30% तक चले जाएंगे. It leaves a very bitter taste for everybody else in the organization. They're like, यार हम इतनी मेहनत करके आए हैं, and यहाँ you're putting a red carpet. So the communication around it needs to be right. Let's go forward. Cross mentoring. In most organizations, I see they have a women leader, and she has a women mentee. But that does not work. You need women getting mentored by men and men getting mentored by women to understand the entire diversity. I know I have some question there. I'm not sure. Yes.
2024. Why are we still talking about two genders?
But that's very interesting.
So it's not just you.
Yes.
I'm listening to conversations since morning.
Yeah.
We are only speaking about he and she. It's 2024. This conversation is very 2000. And especially if you are from L&D, we shouldn't be speaking about in binaries, right? And if you are talking about D&I, I'm sorry, but there are countless genders out there. What if I don't identify as a man or a woman?
Sure. That's
So
very true.
I think this entire conversation is very anti-queer people.
I concur with you. And that's why, I don't know if you've noticed, but since morning I've been saying folks in the room. I never mention ladies and gentlemen for the same reason, because some years back I was told that in your audience you could have anybody who could be anywhere along the spectrum. Just to bring the conversation back from where ma'am has taken it, because I am sensing a lot of organizations today are focusing on women, right? which is howsoever they qualify it as cisgendered man or a cisgendered woman, is where I'm saying what will work and what will not work. And clearly the people under focus really are women who identify as women, because I'm sensing that's a larger open one. I agree with you, because it's like an iceberg. There are so many identities which are below the iceberg. And abhi humne thodi der pehle dekha na, mental wellness itself is not an open debate. So sometimes sexuality is definitely not a open debate. So that's where I'm.
Sexuality and gender do not happen sometimes. It's identity.
Sure.
Nobody chooses to identify as a man and a woman. It's just that's the way somebody is.
So I'm saying.
So, for example, with all due respect, I will not assume your gender just because you're dressed as a cis woman.
That's very kind of you.
My point is, if we're talking about diversity hiring, let's talk about diversity hiring. Diversity is not just about biological male and
Absolutely.
biological women. It includes people with disabilities, it includes people with different race, phenotypes, and also different genders. Right?
Absolutely.
So my point is, let's move the conversation from cis men and cis women. The term is not even man and woman. It's cis men and cis women, or biological male and biological female.
Absolutely.
So till the time we do not fix our language and we do not sound inclusive, this is all just performative.
How's that going to help?
Because how is it
Ma'am, why don't you do a survey and find out how many genders are there in this?
I think because, and I.
Just focus on the topic here.
Okay, we'll take a pause here. That's all right. Everybody's. I think the whole. Ma'am, may I borrow attention back from you?
Let her do a survey, ma'am.
also,
You're hijacking what I.
I'm not, I asked
Yeah, let her do it. We can
All right.
take it offline.
So I'm gonna take the control back, because I think, I think I did the right thing when I called my organization Go Diverse. Because बहुत टाइम लगाया था मैंने और ट्रेडमार्क कर रखा है मैंने इसका. And I think the reason I did that is I concur with what ma'am is saying. I concur with what other people could think. But the idea really is sometimes when you're on a stage like this, I think I also have the responsibility to talk about some of the burning topics that organizations could be struggling with and they want an answer. So that's where I'm going to keep this conversation back here, because clearly we can have very diverse point of views. Let's go forward. And that's why I say cross-mentoring. I didn't say women mentoring or men mentoring, because it's really about that crossness that helps. What also works is work-life balance programs. Now, very recently, to the point that ma'am made, one of my clients that I was working with, they said, we are going to approve a menstrual leave policy. I said, बहुत अच्छी बात है, करना चाहिए. But then I had a pushback to them. I said, एक बात बताओ, there are a lot of men out there and a lot of other people out there who could have a chronic sciatica issue or a chronic diabetes. Then you should also have a policy which allows people, because they are ailing, to take a leave like women are allowed to take. So unless a policy is for all, policy for one doesn't really possibly help. Taking it forward, ERG networks. Now, in how many of your organizations do you have women ERGs? Some people have women ERGs. How many of you have ailing parents at home? A lot of us have ailing parents at home. And doesn't it make sense to have an ERG for people who have ailing parents? There is so much of cross-information that needs to move away, especially when you have ailing parents. So think about what ERG will really work in your organization. If you have more PWD, have a PWD. If you have LGBTQI out in the open, have that. But just moving away from women-centric ERGs to more larger ERGs. Let's go forward. What really works is leadership accountability, gender coaching. Like ma'am said, I have not mentioned women coaching, I said gender coaching. How many of you have sometimes heard from a leader saying, I have both a man and a woman in my team and I treat them equally? But ये तो सही नहीं है ना, lazy form of leadership है. क्यों? क्योंकि अगर men और women इतने ही same होते हैं, तो फिर diversity की बात ही क्यों कर रहे हो? If everybody is equal and you have to treat them equally, so maybe what we don't need is equality. What we need is really equity out there. Taking this forward, I'm not going to spend much time, but 4 things we help organizations with is measure, mobilize, momentum, and monitor. ये पहला वाला मेरा favorite है. How many of you would agree with me and laugh at it? I don't know. But when I go to an organization who wants to embark on an inclusion journey, I ask them, एक बात बताओ, who's going to pay for the party? And how long is this party going to be? वो कहते हैं ना अपने lawyer, doctor और consultant से कभी कुछ नहीं छुपाना चाहिए. Because you have to tell me what you're ailing with, right? So measuring that. The other is mobilizing. You see, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, you can't do mass shooting. You have to do sharp shooting. If I want women, I have to ensure cabs. If I have, my focus is PWD, I have to get ramps made. If I want to hire LGBTQI, I need to change my policy. All of this needs money. And I need to know how long the money is going to come, because otherwise these initiatives are going to be very half-baked. The next one is momentum. And this is my favorite, which is about creating an inclusion calendar. Now, Women's Day कब आता है? सबको पता है. और Men's Day कब आता है? I like that women are giving me that answer. But then there is also Pride Day. There is also PWD Day that needs to be managed. And if you don't have an entire inclusion calendar, then it looks like only one gender is being actually preferred here. And the last is also monitor, which is more about psychological safety. I have recently found one very interesting way to find out psychological safety is go to those people in your organization who didn't make it to the last IJP. What they say to you is a very good measure to understand a little bit of culture, little bit of psychological safety, if people feel safe to actually tell you what they mean to say. I have last few slides to show you. So in 2021, the word of the year was? Not COVID. COVID nikal gaya tha tab tak. So in 2021, the word of the year was actually allyship, right? और ये एक मैं आपको इंटरेस्टिंग कहानी सुनाना चाहती हूँ जो मेरे साथ बहुत रिसेंटली हुई. आई वॉज एट एन ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, और ध्यान से सुनिएगा ये स्टोरी में क्या हुआ. तो आई वॉज टॉकिंग टू अ वेरी सीनियर लीडरशिप टीम. देयर वर मेन एंड वेरी फ्यू women in my room. So as soon as I started 2-hour session, the men weren't saying anything. I said, okay, कुछ करते हैं जुगाड़. So I started asking the women, how is your experience of working in the organization? What have you experienced? After the session got over, so the HR folk came to me and said, Kanika, it didn't go very well. I said, yeah, I realize it didn't go very well, but what do you think happened? She said, I said, what did the women say? Because let me hear from the women what they had to say. The answer that I got that day changed my perspective about allyship. She said, when you ask women to share their experience in an inclusion workshop, what you are not realizing is these women have to go back tomorrow and work with the same set of men. Yeah, and if these women clearly call out that there is inequity and discrimination, how are they going to go back and work with the same set of people? And that's the day I realized true meaning of allyship. You see, allyship is when men speak for women, not women speaking for women. Allyship is when Kanika speaks for the LGBTQAI. Allyship is when someone from the person who does not identify into that community speaks for you is actually real allyship. And allyship is actually have two elements, like ma'am was saying earlier. There is performative allyship. बातें बहुत अच्छी करते हैं, कैंडल वैंडल भी लगा लेते हैं व्हाट्सएप के ग्रुप के ऊपर, है ना? Which is all performative allyship. And the other is actually allyship. ये फेसबुक पे नहीं होती, ये बोर्डरूम के अंदर होती है. ये कहने के लिए नहीं होती, but literally होती है. And there are 5 elements to it. Feel free to take a picture of that. So these are mentorship, strategizer, connector, opportunity giver, and finally also you're an advocate. Now, when you got the brochure for Go Diverse, you may have got a small slip. I know some of you may have it or not. What I'd like you to do is not perform performative allyship, but real allyship. And on that, I'd like you to write down your name. And along with that, I would like you to write down what role have you recently played. Have you actually done this? Have you actually taken 2 people's email ID and written an email out to each other? If you've not done that, then my friend, you're not a connector. You're just a great mentor out there. Make sense? Okay, let's go forward. I have this last slide because I wanted to share with you the case study. So recently we worked for a client. The psychological sponsor was the CHRO. The financial sponsor was the bank CEO. The SPOC was the DEI HRBP. Target audience, maternity returnees who identify as women. And lastly, industry banking, location pan-India. Problem challenge kya tha unko? Their challenge was their challenge was that they had a leaky pipeline of maternity returnee, low pulse survey scores, grievance complaints, no support crash because they were in wealth management, and largely reward inequalities upon return. So this was the status. Now what did we do? We worked with the client on a pre, a during, and a post. Pre में हमने क्या किया? We had a three-way conversation with the returning, with the mother, expecting mother, the manager, and ourselves. I'll give you an example. There was a woman who was expecting twins and a difficult pregnancy. So we thought she would want to ramp down her career. होता है ना, you don't want to ramp up all the time, you want to ramp down. But when we had a one-on-one call with her, she said, no, who's going to pay for these two babies? Babies cost money. And I have a very sound support system at home. When I come back, I'm looking to get promoted. Imagine had we put her under a low, growth career, probably not the right thing to do. Then during, when she was on maternity, we had an entire EAP service and a counseling and a coaching from a lactation coach to a postpartum coach to help them through maternity. And when they came back post-maternity, we had again three-way conversation to understand if there are any red flags. Because the CEO was very sure that ye talent is important hai, we don't want to lose them. So whatever we can do, little adjustments here and there, we want to find the red flags and then work upon it. So I am sensing sometimes identifying the issue, what you want to solve. And like I said, in inclusion, you can't do mass shooting. You have to focus on what you want to really look at. With that, I would like to close the session. And I want to share one last story with you. My father being in the army, their understanding about civilian world is a little less. So one day he asked me कि बेटा तुम करती क्या हो? मतलब लोग पूछते हैं कि आपकी बेटी करती क्या है? ये मुझे diversity और inclusion समझ नहीं आता. So I had to explain to her what I do. So this is what I told her and told him, and you can pick away if this makes sense to you. I said, पापा आपको याद है आपने मेरी शादी कराई थी? He said, हाँ यार वो दिन तो मैं कभी नहीं भूला. I said, so diversity is calling everybody for the wedding. Chacha, mama, taya. That's diversity. I said, equality is treating everybody similarly. सबको आपने सेम खाना खिलाया, सबको सारी चाचियों को आपने सेम साड़ियाँ दी, है ना? That is equality. Equity is कि अगर किसी की मदर व्हीलचेयर पे आती हैं, so if you create a ramp to get to the stage so that they can meet the bride and groom, that is equity. So then he was like, so what is inclusion? I said, inclusion is if people come back and tell you, शादी बहुत अच्छी थी, शादी में ज़रूर बुलाना हमें अगली बार भी. That's inclusion. And he said, belonging? I said, belonging is when people come back to you and say, हमारे लायक कुछ होगा तो ज़रूर बताना. So that's nothing but belonging. On that note, I want to thank everyone for your time today. Please do connect with us, and thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Everybody connects in a very different way, so feel free to connect with us. Can we go back to the last slide, please, from my presentation?
The expert.
Ji.
So there's been a recent global uproar wherein SHRM removed the E from EE and I. So as an Indian L&D leader, I want to know what are your thoughts on that?
See, SHRM is a global US-based firm, and in Indian context, जो काम आता है वो वहाँ नहीं करता. I'll give an example. When I work with US, there is a lot of conversation of Black Lives Matter. India, that context is not there. When you work with Europe and a UK, there's a lot of conversation on BAME, which is a black minority ethnic. Now, that's something that really works in India. So somewhere I feel when organizations have to work, the solutions that you create for India are very, very different. और तभी मैं पहले कह रही थी, मास नहीं कर सकते. आपकी global firm US में बैठी है, वो कह रही है for us inclusion is all. But ground reality in India could be very different. We don't have very organized NGO sectors who can give you ready-made talent for PWD, LGBTQI, transgender. I'll give you this classical example that happened. I was working with a client and a transgender person came for an interview. It became a big spectacle. Everybody wanted to see this person. Very capable, very good at what they did. But the CHRO took a call. He's like, I can't hire this person right now. Because मैं इसको hire कर लूँ. कल को, people start, if the way people are treating this person, I don't know if we can give them the right atmosphere. Let this person go to an organization where they'll be respected for who they are. So, there are a lot, like I said, morality and reality. Morally, हमें सब करना चाहिए, हमारे को सबके लिए सोचना चाहिए. Sometimes reality is also dependent on money, geography. अब आपका एक plant है ऊंचा हार में लखनऊ में. हाँ विंध्याचल में आपका NTPC का प्लांट है, क्या उसकी रियलिटी पूना चाकन प्लांट की सेम हो सकती है? You know, so you also have to consider a lot of different elements when you look at it. But thank you for the lovely question, ma'am. Yes. Can we go to the previous slide?